those are the reasons why they're not on our list, because just the lack of SEC experience.
Yeah.
I think we both agree they're going to have success.
And I think it will not take long for us to be doing a list like this, and they're both on it. I mean, I think to me that's almost a no-brainer. Truthfully, that they'll both be on a list pretty quickly. Truthfully, because they'll do incredible things, but just not right now, just because of the lack of SEC experience and wins.
I'll be surprised if they're not on this list soon.
It's time for the Brew and Shavers Sports Podcast.
So, Darren, here's
All right.
a headline that I thought we would never be talking about on this show.
You have my attention. Go ahead.
There is a new bowl sponsor for college football. And let me give you a hint if you can figure out who this sponsor might be.
I think it's pretty clear just from the kind of music. I'm still kind of grooving to it, by the way. It's got to be Snoop Dogg. Am I correct?
The new sponsor for the Arizona Bowl, previously sponsored by Barstool Sports, the Snoop Dogg Arizona Bowl, presented by Gin and Juice, will launch next fall. Who would have thought?
You hear people talk about it when you listen to sports business stuff. Everybody wants to get in to the amount of eyeballs that are on live sports, especially live college football. I don't think there's much clear proof. That is absolutely true. Everybody wants to get a part of that, had the amount of eyeballs that are on college football.
Yeah, we talk about money a lot and the role that money plays in these events. I do believe that the Arizona Bowl is all the revenue goes to charity, if I'm not mistaken.
Really? That's interesting.
So that's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, that is very cool.
But yeah, who would have thought?
People make fun of bowl sponsors and the different things that come along. Even if he only does it for 1 year, this will be one that's talked about for a while.
Any guess what the halftime show might be?
I'm just not going to say anything. A couple of things go through my head.
Speaking of money, let's go over to Georgia, where Kirby Smart has signed a massive new deal. Darren, tell us about it.
Well, he could sponsor his own halftime show or bowl game at this point, I think. So it's 10 years, $130 million, $13 million. Just real quick, I won't list them all off, but a little bit of a side note and an equally kind of almost overwhelming number, talking about the amount of money in college football. There are now 6 coaches. I believe it's the number I've heard today or last couple of days. There are now 6 coaches in college football that are making $10 million plus. One of those numbers that I don't care who you are, it doesn't make any sense to me, is Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, who is yet to coach a game in the SEC. I know he has some success in Washington, but he's yet to coach a game in the SEC, and he's part of the $10 million club, which is really interesting. But anyway, Kirby is 130 million, 10 years, $13 million a year. There are incentives that will put him up over that mark every single year, which includes obviously things like SEC championships, regular season and championship game, national championships, making it to the playoffs. All of those things will have incentives that make it more. I've seen a couple of reports, and it kind of went away, so I don't know if it was erroneous reporting or we just don't have all the details yet. We've seen a couple of reports that one of the clauses that's in there is as long there's like a percentage, either like a winning percentage or as long as he's won a national championship, an additional national championship, something like that. At any time anyone has a contract that's more than his, he automatically gets bumped to maintain status as the highest paid coach in college football. Wow. Now, like I said, that hasn't been overly talked about. I've just seen that a couple of places. They were Georgia places. So I've only seen it a couple of places. But I think that's a really interesting thing that I think we'll probably start to see more and more that coaches want to say, well, I'm going to be the highest paid in my conference. I want to be the highest paid in the country. And it's not new, but it seems to be proliferating more and more. And I honestly think we will start to see that more and more as it becomes more prevalent or happens more. Of course, it'll just what's the word? Expand, multiply. There you go. I guess I was trying to make it too big of a word. It'll just multiply, and I think we'll see that. But I think it is interesting that that's what's in this contract, if that's the case.
He's worked hard for it. He deserves it.
Yep.
It's hard to argue against it.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, was it last week we talked about when we were talking about the SEC coach top 5, which, by the way, if you haven't watched that, go back and see that. We ranked the top 5 coaches. But he is the amount of years he's been in the SEC and still is single digits in his SEC losses is just absolutely unreal. He's got national championships, SEC championships, and still only has 9 SEC losses. Pretty incredible.
Phenomenal.
Yep.
Speaking of money, let's go over to the Kentucky Derby where Brian Hernandez Jr. rode Mystic Dan to a thrilling photo finish. It's been a while since we had one of those.
Especially that type.
Incredibly exciting, yeah.
Yep.
And there's some hometown ties to Hernandez Jr. He's from Lafayette, Louisiana.
Wow.
Just down the road from us, 3.5 hours or so?
3.5 hours of beautiful, scenic I-49. Oh, wait, never mind.
What the scenery lacks is made up for in the places to stop and eat.
Now, that's accurate. The one thing you can't say about I-49 is there's some gas station food that in other places would be restaurant food. I mean, you stumble into good food.
Incredible. He's also the first jockey since 2009 to ride the winning horse in the Kentucky Oaks the day before the Derby, and then to win the winning horse in the Kentucky Derby the day after.
Awesome.
So an incredible weekend for Hernandez Jr. and for the owners of Mystic Dan. We are also down to the semifinals in the NBA. 8 teams left. Western and Eastern Conference semifinals are going on right now. And Darren, we still have 33 SEC players on the rosters of teams in the playoffs.
That's awesome.
Interestingly, hey, your school, Vanderbilt, 4 guys.
That's really genuinely surprising to me. If you would just straight up walk up to me and say, how many Vanderbilt guys are in the NBA playoffs? My gut reaction would be, unfortunately, but to have 4, pretty awesome.
Hey, I was sweating it when I was going through the list, and finally I found Naz Reid. Okay, LSU's got 1. Thank you.
That's right.
But there's 3 SEC teams, 2 current and 1 coming into the league officially in July, who have no representation. Any idea who those might be?
Honestly, like I said, truthfully, I would have picked Vanderbilt. My next gut would probably be Oklahoma, but I know they had that one guy that was incredible a couple of years ago, Trace. I can't remember his name, but
he plays for Atlanta.
Yeah. He was absolutely was and is phenomenal, college and pro. So those are the ones that just kind of jump out at me. I don't really know. There's not anybody that really just stands out to me.
You got Oklahoma.
Okay.
That's 1.
Oh,
and
okay.
the other 2 are in the same state.
Oh, well then, I mean, Alabama has to have guys in the playoffs, right? So that eliminates the state of Alabama. So we got to go with Mississippi, right?
You're right. The 2 flagship schools for the state of Mississippi, 0 representation in the NBA.
Wow.
And probably no one in Mississippi is losing any sleep over that.
I would say not. They're worried about football.
I think you're right. Darren.
Yeah.
Well, something that we don't want you to be worried about is the absence of This Week in Sports History on this episode. We're making some changes. We're tweaking some things. And next week it will be back in a new format. Darren, tell us about what this is going to look like going forward.
Well, when we started what we have always called This Week in Sports History, our goal was to every week highlight something that happened during that week that would be a sports moment, but it didn't have to be just condensed down to what we talked about. But what we have seen especially truthfully, as you get into this time of the year, people are seem to be looking for more of what we already talk about: football, baseball, basketball, especially SEC football, baseball, basketball. And so we're just going to change things up a little bit. We're going to start calling it the Sports History Minute. We're going to kind of keep it in that time frame, 60 seconds ish or less. We might go a couple over, but 60 seconds or less. And then we're going to focus on bringing out historical moments that aren't necessarily tied to a date. It may not have happened during the week that the episode is out, but it's things that we're all going to remember that we've talked about. We've already got some fun things with baseball that we'll start next week because we're rolling into Omaha, some stuff like that. We're going to make it things that hopefully, as you're here wanting to talk about SEC football, baseball, and basketball, when we talk about those things in our Sports Minute, you're going to go, oh, yeah, I remember that. That was awesome. It'll be things that really kind of connect that we all remember and have a little bit of, I guess, maybe a moment of nostalgia with, which that was kind of the point when we started this to begin with. So
I like this new format idea, Darren. I'm looking forward to it.
I think it's going to be fun.
Well, you know what else is fun? Talking about SEC baseball.
Well, it depends on who you're a fan of. It can be fun.
Well, for us LSU fans, we had a very nice weekend compared to the way the season's gone so far.
The entire conference has applauded for you this weekend. It doesn't matter who your team is, well, unless you're an A&M fan. You've applauded for LSU this weekend because, boy, you're talking about pulling one off. I mean, Sunday was kind of ugly, but outside of that, man, to get 2 or 3 against A&M, that's good stuff.
It was a bright spot, and Tennessee, you're welcome. You guys have ascended to number 1 now, so we'll just send a thank you card, and that's all we're asking for. A little bit of gratitude.
Right. A little bit of gratitude.
Because I did so much in that game. I did so much.
Yeah. You made a couple of nice nabs there at third base. Oh, wait, no, that was the other guy. Never mind.
SEC still dominates the top 25. Tennessee, as we said, number 1. A&M dropped to 3. Kentucky at 4.
Wow.
Arkansas 5. South Carolina 13. Mississippi State 14. Georgia 15. And Oklahoma 18. So we've got about a couple weeks left, Darren, and we're going to be heading into some postseason play. And what can you tell us about how that's shaping up?
Well, we've got 2 weekends left. Everybody's got probably a midweek game this week and then the next 2 weekend series. And you notice Vanderbilt dropped out of the top 25. They have not had, we were talking about LSU. LSU since mid-April has been on an absolute tear. They've had multiple weekend series wins. They're winning their midweek games. Their bats are starting to come alive, and they are 9-3 in those 12 games since mid-April. Vanderbilt, on the other hand, is 6-6. So when we move to these next couple of things, I think keeping in mind kind of where people are could potentially have some real effect on these, because I think like in LSU, you're outside of the top 25, but you're playing hot at the right time. I think they're 9-12 in the conference, but they've got some good series coming up that are winnable games. They could finish 500 in the conference, have a decent. That's the word I was looking for. A decent. I'm not going to try to say it again. Conference tournament, and then the next thing you know, you're talking about them squeaking into a regional potentially. So this is the SEC East. First thing we'll point out is Kentucky at the top of it, just like they're in the top 5. That's incredible. You're talking about a program that has had a rocket strapped to their back over the last 2 seasons. Incredible what they're doing. And right now, what we're looking at with the SEC East is all teams but Missouri will make the SEC tournament. And also, it's not this way in the West that every team, but in the East, right now, where projections are, every team but Missouri will most likely make the NCAA tournament and make that first regional. Kentucky, Tennessee, and South Carolina are all slotted to be regional hosts. That's the projections right now, with Georgia, Vanderbilt, and Florida all making regionals. But again, like I was talking about, you flip over to the West, you've got everybody but Auburn making the SEC tournament. with Arkansas and A&M being slotted as regional host. That's the prognostications, and Mississippi State and Alabama making a regional. If you look at LSU specifically, more so than Ole Miss is really, really bad this year, is what they have not had a very good year. But if you look at LSU specifically, comparative to the East and where Vanderbilt and Florida are right now, again, your LSU, you have a really nice, you finish out strong, have a really nice showing at the tournament. Next thing you know, you're sneaking into one of the regionals and you're knocking out a Vanderbilt or a Florida, because I think neither one of those teams, both of those teams have to finish strong to really have a solid place. And if you're LSU, kind of end up neck and neck with one of those two schools that have been on a slide and you've been doing this, I think he puts you in a spot for a regional. So Auburn and Missouri are out of the SEC tournament as of right now, and everyone except for LSU and Ole Miss, obviously in addition to Auburn and Missouri, are projected to be in a regional, which is going to be such a strong showing. And if I'm the other teams, I'm afraid, because you never really know what SEC teams are going to look like when regional time comes along and you start facing SEC pitching. So still got some exciting baseball for just about all of the SEC over the next 2 or 3 weeks.
And this is typical with a strong conference like the SEC.
Yep.
And be careful about those teams that sneak in. Sometimes
That's
those
exactly
are
right.
the most dangerous teams.
We talked about Ole Miss and how bad their year has been. Was it 2021? Is that the right year? It was either 19 or 21. It was an odd year. I can't remember which one. That they were trying to run the coach out of town. Let's get this dude out of here. They just hit the right stride at the right time, end up winning the SEC tournament, and ended up in Omaha. They just had an incredible, incredible year. So that can happen. And we will throw out a quick nod to Texas and Oklahoma. Both are right now projected to be in a regional, with Oklahoma being projected to be a regional host. So they're not here yet, but we're still watching them.
And Zach, who was on our show last week, mentioned the other day when I saw him that there's rumor that Vanderbilt, if they get in, might go to the Oklahoma regional.
Yes, that is definitely a possibility. There are the two places I've seen the most is being either in the Oklahoma region or I can't remember the city. Maybe it's Terre Haute, where Indiana State is. Mm-hmm. I've seen that as well. That's a possibility as well. And I will say that the one thing I have seen of all the different models, NCAA, D1, Baseball America, they seem to they're not throwing any SEC teams in regionals together, which in years past has happened from time to time. So I'm glad to see that. I don't think we're going to see that. Outside of the Oklahoma and Texas possible mix-ins, but they're not technically in the conference yet. So
good. Yeah. It's going to be fun to watch unfold these next 2 weekends.
It makes Memorial Day weekend even better when we start rolling into Hoovers.
Well, we've got some basketball to talk about. Last week, we rated the top 5 SEC men's basketball coaches. We didn't want to leave the women out by any means at all, because women's basketball is incredible and the popularity is off the charts right now. So we want to conclude this episode by talking about our top 5 picks for the best women's coaches in the SEC basketball.
I think this will be fun.
Well, let's start this fun, Darren. We'll go a countdown in reverse. So we'll start with our number 5 and work up to number 1. Who's your number 5?
All right, I have, and I hope I'm pronouncing this name right, Yolette McCune, I believe. Is that right? It was with the Ole Miss Rebels. She has been there for 6 years. She's actually, it's kind of crazy when you start looking at the SEC women's coaches, not a whole lot of tenure. In the last 5 years, there's been a lot of changeover. There's only, I think it's 5 coaches at 5 different teams that have a tenure of 6 years or longer right now. So that's pretty interesting. But she's been at Ole Miss since the 2018-2019 season. So she just finished up her 5th season. She has 4 NCAA appearances, and she doesn't have any Final Fours or championship games, but she does have 4 NCAA tournament appearances, and she has 103 SEC wins. So when you put that side by side, especially when you consider tenure, and when you put that side by side, then to me that puts her in that fifth spot. And I'll leave a name I was going to give a shout out to, but you may have this person on your list, so I'll wait and throw my shout out if you have that person on your list. So that's Yolette McCune from Ole Miss is my number 5. How about you?
She's also my number 5, Darren. Same reason, 103 SEC wins. 2023, Ole Miss was an 8 seed, and they upset number 1 seeded Stanford in the second round. So that's a signature win. I believe last year they had 12 SEC wins, which was the first time in Ole Miss history. So where that program was before her to where it is now, yeah,
Absolutely.
at some schools it would not be considered success, but she's done very well at Ole Miss. And it was hard because when we made this list, at least for me, Darren, I'm looking at Tennessee's new coach, Kim Caldwell,
Yep.
and I think she's a fantastic coach. I think
Yep.
she was is a great hire and is going to have a lot of success there. But I was hesitant to put her on this list
Yep.
because no SEC experience.
That's the thing. That's why I made it a point that she's over 100 SEC wins in her time, because you're exactly right. I think putting the new SEC coach on here would almost make sense, just because she's a hot name that has an established she's going to win wherever she goes. And I'll tell you another one is Kenny Brooks at Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he has 0 SEC wins, so it's hard to put him on the list, even though he has 12 NCAA tournament appearances in his tenure of coaching. Kentucky obviously made a fantastic hire, but we can't really right now put him on a top 5 list because he hasn't really shown what he's going to do in the SEC, just like Kim Caldwell.
And that's no knock on his coaching or Caldwell's.
No,
Kenny
absolutely.
Brooks took that Virginia Tech team in 23 to the Final Four. That's
Yep,
outstanding. So
absolutely.
2 very good quality coaches, but those are the reasons why they're not on our list, because just the lack of SEC experience. I
Yeah.
think we both agree they're going to have success.
And I think it will not take long for us to be doing a list like this, and they're both on it. I mean, I think to me that's almost a no-brainer. Truthfully, that they'll both be on a list pretty quickly. Truthfully,
Yeah.
because they'll do incredible things, but just not right now, just because of the lack of SEC experience and wins.
I'll be surprised if they're not on this list soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about your number 4?
Number 4, I'm going headed down to the good state of Alabama. Say down to, I guess it'd be over to for us, wouldn't it? Christy Curry has been at Alabama for 10 years, almost 10 years, has almost 200 SEC wins, and has 12 NCAA tournament appearances. Again, not any championships, not any Final Four appearances, but she's been to 12. She's taken teams to 12 NCAA tournaments, and again, is sitting right on that threshold of having 200 SEC wins, which is pretty incredible. So I had to put her at my number 4. That was one that made sense to me. How about you?
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. I think these lists are going to be very similar,
It's
and
really interesting.
we did not collaborate on this at all.
People are going to start to think I don't come up with my own list, because last week I matched Brandon almost to the number 1. This week you and I are matching. We did not talk, like Ben said, we have not talked about these at all. So you want to do your number 3?
Yeah, let's see if we could just to show folks that we didn't collaborate.
That's right.
My number 3 is Vic Schaefer from Texas.
Go ahead.
Yours too, right? 109 wins at Texas, actually a mark of 109.32, an overall coaching mark of 410 wins, 204 losses. Naismith Coach of the Year in 2018, 3-time SEC Coach of the Year, Big 12 Coach of the Year. At Mississippi State, he took them to the Sweet 16, NCAA runner-up twice, Elite 8.
Yep.
Incredible success at Mississippi State. Then he came home to Texas, where he was originally from. And what has he done at Texas? He's taken him to the Elite 8 3 times.
Yep.
So incredible coach, incredible success. Vic Schaefer is my number 3.
Yeah, and to me, one of the things that really pushed him up that list to get to number 3 above some of the other names we've talked about is the fact that if you look at what he's done in the SEC, it's not just at Texas as we welcome Texas in. Like you pointed out, he had incredible success at Mississippi State. I mean, he's the person on this list that's got just about the highest win total, at least of our top 5, of SEC wins. So he's going to bring a lot to the table when he brings the Longhorns into SEC basketball next year, because he's going to know the layout. He knows what he's facing. That definitely gives him a heads up. That's not the word, man. I'm struggling for words tonight. A little bit of an advantage. How's that with Jenny? I believe her name is Baranchik. That is the Oklahoma ladies head coach, women's basketball head coach. He definitely has a heads up on her, or is a little bit ahead of her, because he already knows the layout. And so I think Texas will be an immediate fit with him at the helm, and they will do some incredible things next year.
How about your number 2?
All right. Number 1 and number 2 were very, very difficult. And I'm assuming that you have the same 2, even if we end up with them in different orders. So I do want to stop for just a second and give a shout out to Robin Pingleton, who is the head coach at Missouri, who has had incredible success. She's got over 200 wins. She's taken them to multiple NCAA tournaments, but it's a history thing. They've been on a downward trajectory over the last few years. Made an NIT, but nothing like they were in her first few years at Missouri. So couldn't really put her in the top 5, but I did want to at least give her a shout out. All right. So my number 2 is not going to be popular in the state of Louisiana, that she's number 2, but I have Kim Mulkey at my number 2. You cannot deny 22 NCAA appearances, 5 Final Fours, 2 championships, or not more 5 championships, not 5 Final Fours. Sorry, but in the SEC, she does have a SEC regular season championship. She also has 91 wins, and she's taken her team to the tournament. And we've seen, last year with the national championship, and this year with a great run. So she deserves in every way to be there, but because of a difference in the amount of time spent in the SEC, I have her at number 2. How about you? Who's your number 2?
And you were right the first time. 5 Final Fours, 4 national championships.
Okay.
3 of those at Baylor, of course, 1 at LSU. And she only trails Gino Auriemma and Pat Summitt in terms of most championships won. Auriemma's got 11, I believe, and Summitt finished with 8.
Yep.
So Mulkey is third with 4.
Yep.
When you look at her whole body of work, and most of her wins came with Baylor.
Right.
Like you said, 91 wins in the SEC. She's had tremendous amount of success. She's a 3-time AP Coach of the Year, 7-time Big 12 Coach of the Year, and she's continuing that with LSU. But I think your point is I think Mulkey is an outstanding coach.
Yep.
And I wanted to put her at number 1, but your point, Darren, I want to see some more success in the SEC.
Exactly.
There's not been an SEC championship yet while she's been at LSU. She hasn't beat South Carolina yet. They've beaten LSU 16 times in a row, I believe.
Yep.
So until that comes, I have a hard time putting her over my number 1, which is Dawn Staley.
Absolutely.
With over 440 wins at South Carolina, 3 national championships at South Carolina, which puts her right behind Mulkey on the all-time list of national championship wins. 6 Final Fours, 8 SEC championships. She's been Coach of the Year 4 times, SEC Coach of the Year 7 times. She's continuing to do it at a very high level. This past season was pretty phenomenal what South Carolina accomplished.
Yep.
So for now, I think I've got to put Dawn Staley at that number 1, even though my heart would prefer to put Kim Mulkey there because she's the LSU coach. But you can't deny what Dawn Staley's done, so I've got her in my number 1 spot.
And I tell you, one of the things that sticks out to me about her is just looking at the last 2 years. They didn't make it to the national championship game 2 years ago, but from that team, that had they not ran into the LSU that they ran into, LSU was just They were hitting their stride like we talked about with baseball. They hit it at the exact right time and became unstoppable in the NCAA tournament. They run into anybody else but them, they go right to the championship. But even without going to the championship, that team had 5 draft picks in the WNBA. 5 draft picks in the WNBA, and then she comes back the next year. We'll just do it again, but this time we'll make it to the championship game, and they win the national championship. To me, that encapsulates what she's been able to do at South Carolina in the tale of 2 seasons. You lose that many people off of your team to the NBA and then turn right around the next year and win a national championship. Pretty incredible.
And don't forget where South Carolina was before Dawn Staley got there.
Absolutely. They were not a team that everybody was talking about breaking viewership records. That was not happening in South Carolina.
No. And when you look at Dawn Staley and Kim Mulkey, I think they would make the top 5 list of college women's basketball coaches nationwide, period.
Yep, absolutely.
That's just how good they are. So yep. I like these newcomers. Kenny Brooks has a track record. He's coming in, and I'm excited to see what Kim Caldwell does at Tennessee.
Absolutely.
I think the future is so bright for SEC women's basketball.
Shout out to Shave Ralph. I think she's doing a good job. Got him to the tournament this year. Just had to throw that in. All right, I feel better.
Nice. That's very kind of you. Everybody and all those Vanderbilt fans in Nashville are saying, thank you, Darren. Thank you for remembering us.
That's right. We do have a women's basketball team.
Kindness goes a long way.
That's right.
So, well, we started off this episode by talking about Snoop Dogg being a new bowl sponsor, and how are we going to top that in an ending?
I don't know. I don't know how you top that. Maybe we can call on Snoop to sponsor women's basketball, like be a sponsor of the SEC tournament next year. What do you think?
I don't know about that, but one way that you can help us if you're watching or listening is to hit that like button, that subscribe button, so you get notified anytime new episodes come out. We appreciate your support so much. We're just a couple of guys that live in Louisiana that love to talk about sports.
Absolutely.
And it just blows us away that you would actually listen and watch and participate. So send us your comments, your feedback, like, subscribe, come along with us as we continue this journey together. We just do this because we love sports. We're not making any money off of it. We're just having fun. And so we like the fact that you're having fun with us. And we share that love of sports. So New episodes drop every Tuesday on your favorite podcast platform, and of course here on YouTube as well. And until next week, y'all take care.
Have a great week.
Thank you for making the Brew and Shaver Sports Podcast your go-to sports show. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our show if you haven't already. Your feedback is so important. Let us know what you think about this week's show. Send an email to brewandshavers@gmail.com or a text to our text line 318-390-3599. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again for listening to the Brew and Shavers Sports Podcast. See you next week.